What if Alcatraz prison had never closed? Alcatraz, famously known as The Rock, stood as the U.S. government's most feared and isolated maximum security prison. Its remote location in San Francisco Bay made it both a symbol of inescapable punishment and an infamous site for some of the most notorious criminals in history. But what if Alcatraz hadn't closed in 1963? What if it continued to house criminals, and eventually terrorists, well into the modern era? In this alternate timeline, Alcatraz remains operational long after its closure in reality, becoming a defining symbol of America's tough stance on national security. Its island location, once a logistical nightmare, could have been viewed as a perfect spot for housing high-value detainees after the rise of global terrorism in the late 20th century. Despite its iconic status, Alcatraz had one significant flaw. Its operational costs were astronomical. With its location on an isolated island, maintaining the prison's infrastructure and security required constant resources. However, in this alternate history, the U.S. government might have turned Alcatraz into a self-sustaining fortress, using inmate labor to maintain the facility, grow food, and even make the prison a place for training military personnel. As the need for secure prisons grew in the 1980s and beyond, particularly with the rise of terrorist activities, could Alcatraz have evolved into the ultimate fortress, a place that could house the most dangerous individuals while operating as a profit-generating institution for the government? While Alcatraz became synonymous with escape attempts, it also became a symbol of failure, with the famous 1962 escape still haunting its reputation. But in this alternate history, imagine a scenario where the pressure to keep Alcatraz secure becomes greater than ever as the 21st century arrives. With terrorist suspects being held there, would Alcatraz's reputation as an impenetrable fortress be tested? What would it have been like to house dangerous terrorists on an island with only one way in or out, heavily guarded and with constant surveillance? Would this have made Alcatraz an even stronger deterrent for would-be escapees, or would it have simply become another failed experiment in keeping high-profile prisoners locked down? By the late 20th century, with the emergence of global terrorism and transnational organized crime, Alcatraz would likely have become a prime candidate for housing high-profile criminals. But would it have been effective? Terrorists, including those responsible for major attacks like 9/11, might have been sent to this remote facility. In this timeline, Alcatraz stands as a prison for dangerous individuals, held not just for their crimes in the US, but for threatening national security. But would housing suspected terrorists at Alcatraz make sense? Would its isolated nature have been more secure than Guantanamo Bay? Or would the US government have opted for other, more accessible locations? Would Alcatraz have become a global symbol for American counterterrorism? Or would it have faced growing pressure to be shut down due to human rights concerns? Despite the potential to make Alcatraz a secure, self-sustaining prison, the issue of overcrowding could have been its greatest weakness. With the rise of terrorism and organized crime, would Alcatraz have become a symbol of a broken prison system, packed with both violent offenders and high-profile detainees? Could the American government have kept conditions humane while holding dangerous individuals? With the political climate shifting and international eyes focused on the US, would pressure from the United Nations and human rights groups have led to reforms? Or would Alcatraz have remained a symbol of unyielding punishment, keeping its prisoners isolated from the rest of society? Alcatraz's reputation for isolation might have become even more infamous if it had remained open into the 21st century. Prisoners held at Alcatraz, especially terrorists and organized crime figures, would likely have experienced extreme psychological stress due to the facility's isolation. In the face of modern warfare and the mental toll of being separated from the outside world, would the US government have faced international scrutiny for holding such high-profile individuals in solitary conditions? Would this have led to calls for reform from human rights organizations or even within the American public? After the events of 9/11, the US government began detaining suspected terrorists in Guantanamo Bay. But in this alternate timeline, Alcatraz could have served as an alternative to the controversial facility. Its isolated location would have made it ideal for holding high-value detainees, far from the public eye. But the question remains, would Alcatraz have been more effective or more controversial than Guantanamo Bay? Would the facility's harsh conditions have led to more outrage and protests worldwide? Would Alcatraz's legacy as a prison for criminals make it the ideal location for suspected terrorists? Or would it have been perceived as a symbol of America's overreach and disregard for international law? In this timeline, Alcatraz becomes a prison for a new generation of criminals, including terrorists, gang leaders, and international offenders. But would the influx of these new prisoners fundamentally alter the character of the facility? Would its reputation as an inescapable fortress remain intact? Or would it become a symbol of outdated draconian punishment? With rising concerns over the U.S. prison system, how would Alcatraz have navigated the growing demand for prison reform and a more rehabilitative approach to justice? By the 21st century, media coverage of prisons, particularly high-profile ones like Alcatraz, would have been intense. Imagine Alcatraz becoming a focal point for investigative journalism, documentaries, and even reality TV shows. Would the media's constant spotlight on the prison's inhabitants, especially suspected terrorists, have fueled debates on surveillance, privacy, and civil liberties? Would the continuous portrayal of Alcatraz as a tough prison have amplified its mystique, or would it have led to calls for greater transparency and reform? With its rich and storied history, Alcatraz could have become a symbol of resistance against the perceived overreach of the U.S. government. As the 21st century brought issues of civil liberties to the forefront, Alcatraz's continued operation might have sparked growing protests, with groups demanding the closure of the prison and the reform of the justice system. Would Alcatraz have become a battleground for prisoners' rights advocates, or would it have stood firm as a symbol of national security? Alcatraz's evolution could have embraced the latest in prison security technology, from surveillance drones to biometric scanners. Would the U.S. government have used cutting-edge technology to enhance security and ensure that the most dangerous criminals remained under control? But would these technologies have raised concerns about the loss of privacy and civil liberties? Alcatraz would have become a testing ground for new technologies, but at what cost? Alcatraz's continued operation would have had a profound impact on the San Francisco Bay Area. As the prison became a focal point for debates about national security and human rights, would it have affected the region's economy, tourism, and public perception of the U.S. prison system? Would Alcatraz have continued to draw tourists? Or would its dark history have caused the public to turn away? The presence of a controversial prison would have created a complex relationship between Alcatraz and the surrounding communities. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Alcatraz was its infamous escape attempts. In this timeline, where Alcatraz remains open, what if a high-profile escape had succeeded? The ramifications of such an event would have been massive, with national security at stake. Would the prisoners have gone underground, evading the authorities, or would the escape itself have become a global spectacle, forcing the U.S. government to reassess its prison system entirely? As public opinion began shifting in the late 20th century towards prison reform, Alcatraz's continued existence would likely have come under fire. International human rights organizations and activists would have pushed for the closure of such a high-profile prison, accusing it of violating basic human rights. Would the government have bowed to this pressure, or would Alcatraz have remained an unyielding symbol of national security, defying calls for reform? As we reflect on the hypothetical world where Alcatraz never closed, we are left to wonder what could have been. Would the continued existence of the prison have sparked change in the U.S. prison system, perhaps leading to the creation of more isolated, high-security facilities designed to house the world's most dangerous individuals? Or would it have eventually become a symbol of outdated punishment, eventually prompting reforms and calls for its closure? Alcatraz's history is marked by mystery, fear, and intrigue. But in this alternate reality, the island might have shaped the course of U.S. criminal justice policy for decades to come. The possibility of its continued existence raises questions about security, human rights, and the evolving nature of punishment in an ever-changing world. Like and subscribe for more from History Twist. Leave a comment below to request your own what-if video. See you soon for the next video.